Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Analysing Anfield, your tactics and analytics podcast, courtesy of the Blood Red channel. I'm Josh Williams and I'm with David Hughes. Dave, how's things, mate?
Very good, thank you, mate. Very good indeed.
No updates, nothing like that. Same
No,
old.
not. Yeah. I try and bring something to the table every week, but yeah, there's not that much to say. Certainly, I've got nothing, no interest in talking about the Sunday's derby, so we can, we can focus on everything but that then.
Well, it's funny because every week Liverpool are just ploughing on. There's no major updates on the Liverpool front either because the team is still just consistently winning games and making certain games that shouldn't be easy look really, really easy. And overcoming tricky tests and all that sort of stuff. So obviously Liverpool won the derby. Liverpool beat Villarreal last night. And Liverpool have games to come. We have Newcastle on the weekend. We have the second leg against Villarreal. So plenty to talk about, plenty going on. But I think first we'll talk about some news today, mate. Jurgen Klopp. Quite surprisingly, I thought. Not that I thought he was going to get offered in 2024, but I didn't think he'd make a decision now, and I didn't think he had to make a decision now. And I do appreciate that he's got a life, so you might want to live that outside of football. But according to reports, anyway, he seems relatively keen on extending his deal, apparently for another 2 years, which would take him to 2026 potentially. What are your thoughts? Are you surprised or?
I'm a little bit, yeah, because I am a little bit surprised because it's. I don't know. It's very demanding at that level, isn't it? You're kind of involved in football matches. Not even the day-to-day training. When you're Liverpool, when you're Manchester City, when you're at the kind of elite clubs, you're involved in football matches like every 2 or 3 days. Just the travel that goes with it, the amount of detail that goes into competing at that level is just. And I imagine it'd be overwhelming, but. I think those type of characters, your Klopps and everyone who's kind of involved at the highest level. I think they just live for it, don't they? They thrive on it. So maybe that's why you can have the energy to do it. So I am a little bit surprised because I thought maybe he would have went off into the sunset as a hero in 2 years' time. But I mean, things are just so good at the moment. Maybe he's got the view of, well, why would I? Why would I not enjoy another 4 years of what's going on and what we've kind of built at the club. So a little bit surprised, but when you think about it, I can understand why he wants to stay.
Yeah, well, that's been my thoughts on it. You do have to kind of think he is still relatively young for a football coach. I'm going to say, let me just double check that. Klopp is 54. And just for a bit of perspective on that, Erik ten Hag is 52. And he's perceived as a young coach who's now just making his step up to the elite, if you like, in terms of taking a big job and things like that, moving to a Big Five European league. It does feel like Klopp's been doing this for ages now, and he's been doing this for about 20 years, but he's still young in managerial terms. And you do have to think, is he ever going to get a better club job than this at the minute, what he's got right now, in terms of how aligned everything is from top to bottom? The power he seems to have established in the Premier League, I think, is almost bordering on Alex Ferguson levels of power and influence. Obviously, he's listened to at the club. He's a socialist, which fits in with the city and things like that. And I think potentially one of the reasons why he might have been, this is a guess, but one of the reasons why he might have been toying with the idea of leaving in 2024 is, do you reckon he might have viewed his initial Liverpool squad, the one that won the Champions League, as not a fluke, but Liverpool got every transfer right. You got Van Dijk in, you got Salah in, Mane, Fabinho. These are ridiculous Trent, Robertson. And for Liverpool to be able to do that again, maybe he was viewing that as slim chances and things like that. But on the back of that, Liverpool have now added Diaz, who looks like another one. Johnson's looking good. Kanate's looking great. So maybe he's now thinking I can actually dominate with this team and actually attack multiple competitions with this team. It wasn't a fluke what we did.
Potentially, yeah. It's it obviously wasn't a fluke, but there was always the thing hanging around that these players had all just kind of hit the prime together, and there would be a rebuild of some kind needed in the soon to be future, I guess. But kind of gradually over the past 2 or 3 windows, Liverpool have been buying those players. I've been recruiting the quote unquote next generation players who are 24, 25, who have the potential to be as good, really high ceilings and look like they can be key pillars of the team going forward. So yeah, there's every chance that he's looking at it now and going, okay, well, I'm going to lose Salah, Firmino, Mane maybe in the next year or two, but suddenly I've got Jota, I've got Diaz, you've got Harvey Elliott, who's still just a teenager. Alexander Arnold, he's still early 20s. His prime years aren't even here yet. You've just mentioned Kanate, looks really good player. He's still got his prime years to come. Suddenly looking at the team and going, I mean, this next generation is very close to being here, and they look like they can be a team that can compete for all trophies. So why would he not kind of want to enjoy that ride? Maybe that is why, but I think there's probably just a bigger picture, and there's a bigger picture that he's just enjoying himself so much. And as you said, he's where is he going to go in Wales football? Where he'd be able to replicate this? It's possible, but it'd take a lot of hard work, and even then there'd be no guarantee that he'd be getting what he's getting now. So I suspect this is all a big reason why he wants to stay.
I mean, it's not particularly good news for Liverpool rivals. Obviously, Pep Guardiola is supposedly leaving in 2023. I actually think that might depend on whether they win the Champions League. I think if he wins the Champions League this season, for example, I think he probably will get off in 2023. If he doesn't, maybe he'll stay around until that happens. Obviously, Manchester United, as I just said, have appointed Erik ten Hag in the past few weeks. Maybe you could look at United target in 2025 as that's when we win the league, or that's when we really challenge for the league or whatever. Now, on the back of that news that Klopp's staying, it's going to be difficult to do, and it could get to the point, mate, where it does boggle the mind a little bit just how much Liverpool could dominate once Pep leaves in particular. Considering the squad that Liverpool seem to build, 2 players in every position now. Again, Klopp's influence in the league is just going to grow. So, and he's already won a fair few trophies. So,
could you ever foresee a? So as we're talking now, I'm just trying to imagine doing a podcast. Obviously, they didn't exist in the early noughties, but doing a podcast in the early noughties with Arsenal fans talking about Arsene Wenger, after the Invincibles and them being kind of untouchable, winning the league, etc. And obviously, if you think of how his career kind of snowballed in those final few years to the point where he become quite almost a little bit unpopular, at Arsenal. Could you ever see a position where Klopp could potentially stay too long, if that makes sense?
I think he's almost too clever to do that. I think he seems a bit streetwise of that. I do think every coach does get to a point where he becomes relatively outdated. I do think that is a thing. If you look at Mourinho, who was just absolutely peaking, maybe 15 years ago, something like that, 10, 15 years ago. Louis van Gaal has had his time. Arsene Wenger, the same. And Pep Guardiola was so ahead of the curve that his peak is still going. I think it's been going on for about 12 years. Klopp, you could argue, how long's Klopp been at his peak now? About 8 years or something like that.
Yeah, I'd say, yeah.
So I do think it happens, but I think specifically with Linda's under Klopp and things like that, I don't think Klopp does too much of the coaching, and I think a lot of the ideas originate from Linda's as well. I actually think if Klopp wasn't to stay, Linda's would be the man to probably keep it going. The more I've thought about it, and that's probably why Klopp doesn't have to make a big decision 2 years in advance so Liverpool can find a successor. I think if Klopp does leave, Linda's will just keep the ship going in the same direction, hopefully. But yeah, in terms of becoming outdated, I do think that's generally a thing, and that's something that it's difficult to avoid, really. You just got to hope that he does jump before that happens, so that he's remembered for what he delivered at his peak level of performance, rather than Wenger. As you said, he was kind of made a little bit redundant at the end. And I remember games against Guardiola, Arsenal and City. Massive difference, obviously, between the two teams in terms of players, but just in terms of stylistic difference as well. Guardiola's team was just so much more intense than Wenger's, and that's just a modern perception on the game and how that influences things.
I mean, I should clarify just so I don't get any abuse. I'm not saying that I'm predicting that to happen. I think it's just a interesting question to ask because it does happen eventually. But
it is inevitable.
Yeah, but that's it, isn't it? It would if Klopp kind of stayed indefinitely at some point that would happen, wouldn't it? But and I want to clarify. I wouldn't expect that to happen even if he extended his stay until 2026. Because how long would that actually be as a Liverpool career? Would that be 11 years?
That'd be 11 years, yeah.
Yeah, see, it is long in the modern game now. But Liverpool and Klopp's relationship is quite unique in comparison to many other kind of managerial and football club relationships. So that's why I think that has the potential to be successful, for that length of period.
It is quite amazing when you think about he's probably going to go his whole managerial career without ever getting sacked, which is, such a outlier thing compared to the rest of the football world. It's just unheard of. Guardiola's probably going to do the same, to be fair to him. Just 2 one-offs that I'm sure both City and Liverpool want to keep. The way things are at the moment.
There actually isn't another top manager I can think of who's not been sacked.
Yeah, Guardiola and Klopp. That's it, really, isn't it?
Simeone being sacked?
Simeone's a good show, yeah, but I think has he only had one club though?
Yeah, I don't think he's managed before.
No,
Atletico. Maybe you want to look on someone else if you want to do the research and let us know. Then by all means, but
yeah. I mean, I suppose you could say Mikel Arteta has never been sacked, really, couldn't you? But I think when it comes to Klopp and Pep, Klopp's been around for 20 years plus. So, but yeah, aside from the managerial news, in the same breaking news story, I suppose it's emerged that Liverpool they do like Aurelien Tchouameni. We've spoken about him a number of times on this podcast. Reports did emerge from, I think it was David Ornstein around maybe a Christmas period. I initially loved it when I thought about it, actually, and I still love it now, even though I think there's slightly less. It looked like there was more of a need back then because Liverpool were, 3-3 against Brentford, I think it was. Got beat 3-2, I think, by West Ham. 2-2 against Brighton. So Liverpool were shipping goals. Not so much anymore. Liverpool have actually considered the same number of Premier League goals this season as Manchester City, both on 21. But I think still, despite that, if you look at Liverpool's midfield department, they probably could do with a player like Tchouameni this summer.
Yeah. The big thing he has, obviously, is beyond being a fantastic player, this is age, isn't it? And that ties in with the main issue, I guess you're hinting at there. It's not that Liverpool have a quality problem at the moment in the middle. They've got fantastic midfielders. It's just, again, about looking ahead. You're looking, Thiago's being fantastic. Fabinho, you're thinking fantastic, great. It's a good midfield, but they're all obviously getting on a little bit. And maybe we're looking at a potential of the kind of next generation in that area of the pitch. And it's easy to see why Liverpool would be interested for the reasons we've already spoke about, I guess. It is just so interesting that we, and I don't mean this in an arrogant way, but it's interesting the amount of players that we'll speak about on the show that Liverpool then get linked with. It just kind of reiterates that they tend to do good business. You know, they don't tend to, because on the show we don't really talk about players who are in the headlines, do we? There's normally another motive for why we'll speak about a player, you know, something that they're doing well, or we think they thrive in Klopp's system. And it is interesting that a lot of these players do end up kind of coming to the forefront in terms of Liverpool's transfer speculation. So it's yeah, and he's one of them.
Well, yesterday I actually was looking back at a lad that I flagged ages ago, linked with Liverpool ages ago, in Lloyd Kelly, who is at Bournemouth now. But I didn't realise he's now captain of Bournemouth, and he's now a centre back. Whereas when Liverpool looked at him, when we looked at him on the show years ago, was an emerging left back coming through. I think it was Charlton, maybe it was Charlton.
Yeah, I was trying to think who it was there, because it was. I was going to say to you, it wasn't Bournemouth, was it, when we spoke about him?
No. Bournemouth paid about 15 million for him, and that was what put Liverpool off, I think. But he was coming.
Oh, it was Bristol City.
Bristol, yeah. I'm just thinking all the emerging talents come through Charlton, me. You know, like Joe Gomez and Ezzy Concert and all these players. But yeah, Lloyd Kelly crossed my mind. He was a player that we flagged a while back, and that Joshko Gvardiol, who I flagged, I think maybe it was last season, something like that. He's getting linked with Spurs of late, because he's having a good season at RB Leipzig. But yeah, we have a few of them. It's always interesting to see how they get on further down the line. Sometimes you predict winners, sometimes you predict players who, for whatever reason, just fall off the face of the earth. But yeah, in terms of
centre backs who are still playing in the Polish.
You said it, not me. I weren't going to bring that one up then. Bringing up regens. But yeah, my point regarding Tchouameni, yeah, aside from his age, is if you look at Liverpool's midfield department now, or if you consider what it will look like in the summer, Henderson, Fabinho, Milner, Thiago, Keita, Ox, Jones, Elliott, and Carvalho. So if you look at that as a group, for me, that group is probably more offensive than defensive, if you know what I mean. I think Fabinho is probably the only player out of that group who is naturally more inclined to think I am an against the ball player rather than a with the ball player, if you know what I mean. And I think Tchouameni would kind of solve that a little bit. He would add like a degree of just defensive protection, solidity, whatever you want to call it, to Liverpool's midfield department. If you look at, I've flagged these numbers a few times, but it's still the case. If you look at this season across Europe's top 5 leagues, just in terms of tackles and interceptions, Tchouameni is currently 3rd across Europe's top 5 leagues, behind only 2 players. Funny enough, mate, one of the players who he's behind, who I have liked the look of, he's getting on now, so it's no point in even flagging him really, but Christian Norgard at Brentford. He shows up a little bit to me. I don't know, just as complete sidetrack here, but I think he's a good little player.
How old is he now, though?
He's 28. But I think Brentford have got a good one there. But anyway, in terms of Tchouameni, yeah, he's 3rd in Europe's top 5 leagues for tackles and interceptions in total. And I'm pretty sure, last season, I'm pretty sure it was virtually a similar story. I think he ranked inside the top 3 again. But it's a nice thing to have, and probably if you look at Liverpool's midfield departments, arguably what they don't have really, apart from Fabinho.
Yeah, you know, I mean, he has a really important role in that Monaco team, and they've been finishing the season really strong, and he's kind of had a really key role in it. You know, I was just having a look now, and they've won 6 games on the spin, not conceding many goals at all. And I think he's definitely, from what I've read, he's been getting credited with a lot of those kind of strong defensive performances. So. I mean, it's just good to see from a Liverpool perspective, seeing them getting linked with that kind of play, and not just getting linked, but you tend to fancy the chances now because of, you know, how attractive they are as a club to land these profiles, land these players.
Yeah, I have just looked back at last season. and by the same numbers, just tackles and interceptions, he ranked second across Europe's top 5 leagues last season. So inside the top 3, top 2 for 2 consecutive seasons there playing for Monaco. You did just mention that he's playing as part of the 2, I think you said. So it's actually coming through now that Jurgen Klopp has just signed a contract extension as we are live recording until 2026, as I said. So another 4 years minimum, it looks like, of Jurgen Klopp.
I'm glad we discussed it.
Yeah, well, I was going to say then, what do you think, Dave? But I've just asked you what you think for the past 20 minutes. So we'll leave that one there. That is good news, obviously. But yeah, in terms of Tchouameni, I mean, this looks like good news as well. Whether it'll be enough to land Tchouameni, I'm not sure, because Real Madrid are supposedly interested in him. Chelsea are supposedly interested in him. But I think Real Madrid in particular, for some reason, it's just, even despite their current level, it's always feels quite difficult to compete with Real Madrid when it comes to attracting players to the club. You know, Mbappe, for example, Real Madrid have been able to land him, despite Real Madrid, in my opinion, arguably not being as good as PSG at the minute. So it's an interesting.
I'm sorry. No, Camavinga was he was in Liga last year, wasn't he? I can't remember who he was with.
He was with Rennes, I think, wasn't he?
Rennes, yeah, and because there was a few obviously interesting names, some really big teams, but he seemed pretty content on going to Real Madrid when he heard they were interested. So hopefully it's not.
Well, I remember sadly Alisson, when Liverpool were linked with Alisson when he was at Roma. I heard, memes that he was kind of waiting to see if Madrid were going to come in. But I think they had Courtois at the time, or they went and signed Courtois after it or something like that. But it's just, it is the super club in many people's eyes, so difficult to compete. But if Liverpool can compete and Liverpool can land Tchouameni, I think he would be perfect as what Liverpool. I mean, Liverpool have got a great squad at the minute, but in terms of what they don't have, you could argue he is that kind of player. He played at part of midfield too this season, so you could argue he'd have to adapt a little bit if he came to Liverpool. I think Fabinho would stay where he is, and I think Tchouameni would kind of maybe start to play as like a number 8, but not as a number 8 who's going to get forward too much. But I'm not sure where the team will go with him in the team, because I think he'd be a starter.
Yeah. I mean, he'd have to, even if he wasn't straight away, within a year or two, he'd be a starter and then quickly become a kind of key pillar in the team.
Yeah, so we'll leave that news there then, and we'll move on to the Champions League. Obviously, Liverpool had Villarreal, and we did preview it. I think we previewed it. Did we preview it last week?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I also sent out a newsletter anyway, and I was quite concerned about this team just because across the board they did look like a strong defensive unit. And I did risk it sending out a newsletter saying Liverpool might find this one tough. Whenever you say that, you always have to put in a caveat: Liverpool could win 4-0. And that kind of happened in a way. But I did think for 45 minutes it was going to be another one of them, really, similar to the Merseyside derby.
Yeah, look, I mean, stating the obvious, but Liverpool controlled the territory, they controlled the ball, but Villarreal defended the penalty box area really well. It was quite clear what they were doing. Kind of sitting in a low block, they weren't interested in trying to get possession. They were happy to forego that. They weren't interested in pressing high at the pitch. They just wanted to restrict space in their own half. And look, I mean, they did a decent job of it. Well, they did a good job of it.
Was you disappointed with them at all?
I wasn't disappointed. The only thing, if I'm looking at it from their point of view, I understand why they do it. Because you can hopefully try and frustrate an opponent who's clearly superior than you, and maybe hold on for a decent away result. But my issue with that tactic is I just think teams always eventually run out of steam, and you can be undone by kind of freak moments or moments of brilliance. If you think of at 0-0, Thiago's shot from nothing really hits the bar, very easily, a couple of inches lower, and that's the opening goal, and your game plan's done. The goal is an even better example. It takes a deflection from a cross, goes in, and suddenly you're done then. 1-0, and then a quick 5 second, and the whole landscape of the tie changes. So I wouldn't say I was disappointed in them, but I just think there's always a risk when you take on that tactic. I don't believe it's something that's brilliant for a full 90-minute match. I can understand if you maybe adopt it last 30 minutes or so, but I think a team like Liverpool, as they've shown in that game and they showed on Sunday in the Merseyside derby, I think they probe enough and eventually they'll break through.
Yeah, I think for me, I thought they got the first half spot on. I thought they did exactly what they had to do. I thought the game plan was working quite well. What I was disappointed with on their side was we tried to paint them as a team that, in addition to soaking pressure, they can use the ball. And I think the way in which they used the ball in this game, in my opinion, was quite poor. I think they're better than what they showed. They can play football, they can break. Danny Perego was a better ball player than he showed. Better conductor, if you like, in the middle of the park than he showed. And the likes of Chukwueze and Danjuma are usually bigger threats on the break. I suppose that's testament to Liverpool's level and Liverpool's counter-pressing on the day. The security that they gave the centre-halves and things like that, because I think over the course of the game, they had one shot and it didn't hit the target. Don't think Alisson had to make a save. So I tried to paint them as better than that, and they will be better than that next week. But having said that, I do think that the tie is pretty much sewn up. Klopp won't say that, but I mean, when did Liverpool last lose by 2 goals?
Yeah, you're right. And I actually think, weirdly, if you look at that second leg, Ray says after the game, doesn't he, that it's going to be a completely different tie over there. The approach is going to be different from them. I guess it's obviously going to be that. It's obviously going to be a different approach because they're 2-0 down. They're going to have Gerard Moreno back as well. Who's such an important player for them. Obviously, they missed him. And I think a little bit, Josh, on what you were saying, that they were a lot poorer on counter-attacks or on the ball. That probably had a little bit to do with it because how important he is for them. So, we can accept that. But when you actually think of it, if they approach it and more attack-minded in the return leg, maybe trying to give him a better platform to score goals, try and reverse the scoreline, etc., then all I can see, honestly, given how much better Liverpool are than Villarreal, all I can see is probably the deficit being extended.
Liverpool getting more space.
Exactly, yeah. I think they'll get more spaces for attackers to run into. If you think of the form like Trent's in, Thiago's in, think how they'll be able to exploit those spaces, with passes, with balls in to the forwards. I could see Liverpool actually having quite a comfortable evening if this game opens up more. And I think Villarreal are in a position now where they're going to have to try and open the game up and be a little bit more attack-minded, and that'll just play right into Liverpool's hands.
Yeah, I mean, Liverpool didn't fall for the same tricks that Bayern fell for. I think that was crucial to Liverpool eventually finding a breakthrough. Obviously, I've mentioned a few times that Bayern posted, I think it was 25 shots from outside the box over their 2 legs against Villarreal. And they also hit 34 crosses, which is the most that they've hit in a single game all season. Liverpool in their game hit, I think it was 7 shots from outside the box. Yeah, it was. And 16 crosses, which is virtually what they average in the Premier League anyway. So Liverpool kind of played their usual game. They didn't play the game that Villarreal almost encouraged them to play, which is a bit suboptimal, if you like. Liverpool actually had 2 shots less than Bayern did in Bayern's home leg, but the shots were just better quality, closer to goal. And I think Liverpool just executed, what you need to do to break down a block better than Bayern Munich did. And it bodes well for setting up a final against one of City or Real Madrid. It's nice that that's still in the balance. It's probably going to be Manchester City. God help us. But
did you get to watch that game?
Yeah. I actually caught, frustratingly, I had something to do, so I caught the first hour. I think I caught.
Yeah.
So the end, when it kind of went a bit mental and the Panenka and all that, I actually missed that live.
Yeah, I must admit, um,
Man, was it crazy though?
yeah, through my own kind of commitments this year, I haven't watched a lot of I've only been able to watch Wednesday Champions League games, so I've missed like 50% of the big games this year on Tuesdays, and season's finished now. So being able to, I was watching that, and hand on heart, that was one of the best in terms of pure entertainment. Forgetting everything
Yeah.
else. That was one of the best Champions League ties I've watched in a long time. Like, it was thoroughly enjoyable. I mean, I think
You
Pep
actually,
would go on.
I was going to say, you can't say that either, can you, about too many Manchester City ties?
No.
A few years back, to be fair to him, they had one with Monaco. Kylian Mbappe was there. That was a great tie. But
The
other than that,
Spurs one
City's,
wasn't bad as well, mate, if you remember that
that's
one.
exactly, that's a good shout, actually, yeah.
Mm.
Maybe I'm wrong there, because the one
No.
against us was not bad either.
Yeah, but the thing is, though, I was about to say Pep must have been furious because he's
Yeah.
so invested in control, isn't he? And he created so many big chances, and somehow they've only come away with a 1 goal lead. And that you've just said the ties and the balance. I think that is the best way to describe it. It's just, I could not predict who was going to go through. You'd think City, but I don't know, Madrid over there.
They are a weird team, aren't they?
Yeah.
Especially with Benzema. He does seem to have really stepped into that Ronaldo type void where you just kind of give him the ball in the box and he will just find something. He will make something out of it. He'll turn water into wine, if you like.
Yeah.
You don't need to feed him particularly well, and he will just decide a game almost. That's 2 against Manchester City. Scored a hat-trick against PSG. Scored a hat-trick against Chelsea. So if Liverpool do get in the final, he's obviously the major threat. But we don't want to get carried away with that yet anyway. We've obviously got that to preview further down the line if anything happens there. So, but yeah, Champions League over and done with for now until next week. In the meantime, Liverpool have, I suppose you could label a banana skin fixture against Newcastle United away from home after European game. Early kickoff against a team who have won, I think, the past 6 in a row at St James's Park.
Yeah, so I had a little look at them recently, and if the season started on New Year's Day, they'd be second in the league behind only Liverpool. Which shows how many points they've actually picked up. I think they're on course to win 5 Premier League games in a row for the first time in something like 7-8 years. And yeah, they're flying, aren't they? Especially, as you said, at St James's Park. It's a tough fixture for sure. There is one little thing that I do want to flag, but maybe we'll stay on the kind of pro Newcastle stuff for now, and then I come back to me on it. But looking at it from a Liverpool point of view, yeah, it looks tricky because they've definitely turned the corner. I think Howe's done a really good job there, and they've got suddenly they look like they've got. I remember looking at that squad at the start of this season and thinking, like, it's just not a great squad. I think maybe we might have even previewed it going, there's no one there really. Maybe St. Maximin, but he's, we've got fitness issues. But now you're looking at it and you're like, there's some decent players in there. Joel Linton suddenly looks like an unbelievable player playing in deeper positions. And, they look a much stronger outfit than they did, 7-8 months ago.
Well, I was going to say, in the January window, we gave a rating to every Premier League team based on the business that they'd done. Can you remember what we gave Newcastle? I feel like it was decent, though.
Well, I think we probably did, but I can't remember
Because
what. I think we definitely did, actually.
Yeah, I think one thing that frustrates me when it comes to this is obviously they've had massive help when it comes to finances and things like that. But I don't think in this situation you can put it all down to out of thrown money at the problem. I think you also have to appreciate that the money that they did throw at the problem was thrown in at good solutions, basically. I think the players that they got in, it was a really high pressure window that for Newcastle. And I can't remember who it was who oversee. It was the guiding presence for the recruitment that they undertook. But the players they bought, I do think looking back now, there's some good moves in there. Even at the end, just getting the likes of Matt Targett on loan, established Premier League fullback, and then, a left back. There's not too many of them around. Dan Burn as well, who I've learned since, to be honest, is horrible. He's very, very aggressive centre half him, and just like, punches people into the ground off the ball and that when the referee's got his back to him and things like that. So I do think.
Where's this? Where have you seen this?
Haven't you seen it?
No.
So the past few times I've watched Dan Burn, he's an absolute Sunday League wind-up merchant. Like, there was a moment against, I think it was Spurs, and Newcastle have a corner, and the ball gets cleared. So Spurs try and counter-attack from Newcastle's corner, if you know what I mean. So as they're breaking, everyone's running up the field, and Emerson Royale is doing his absolute best to support the attack by just running forward for his team. And out of nowhere, 6'6" Dan Burn, who's also running back, just goes bang. Like it's a shoulder badge in a way, but it's like a rugby tackle almost.
Right.
And he didn't even get booked.
Did he not get pulled back?
No, I don't think so, because the referee was also running forward, didn't see it. And the camera panned to Dan Burn about 2 minutes later after Emerson had got up and received treatment, and Dan Burn was blowing kisses in his direction. And I've seen it a few times. I love him, I think he's great, but he is horrible as well.
Yeah. Kind of behaviour that you love on your own team, just maybe not so much when you're coming up against it.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, when you've got a physical presence like that, I mean, you can put it about, can't you? You can really establish your imposing presence on the game, if you like.
Well, that's what they've got, haven't they? They've got him. I think Joe Linton, we just spoke about, can do that in the middle of the park quite well. Obviously, got Wood as well up top, which, that was always going to be a bit of a short-term buy, wasn't it? But he's kind of done the job that he was brought in to do. It's signed from Burnley, throws himself about, gets the odd goal as well. And I mean, look, Willie Cause Van Dijk seems to do quite well against players like that because of his own physical dominance, but doesn't mean that he still won't be a little bit of a handful, on Saturday. And it's someone that you kind of you're going to be in for a bit of a battle with.
Yeah, Bruno Guimaraes is obviously another player that we flagged at the time. We were quite surprised that they were able to land them. And after initially coming, sorry, go on.
I was just going to say, until they started getting paid 4 times as a weekly salary, then it kind of made a bit more sense.
Yeah. But I think he initially came through behind the scenes. I think he was entered into Premier League football very slowly by Eddie Howe. And now that he's actually playing as number 8, I think, which is a little bit surprising. And on the back of that, he scored 1 or 2 goals as well. So yeah, across the board, Newcastle have obviously improved. They've spent the money well, which is easier said than done. And looking at the squad and what Liverpool are going to come up against, they do have a number of players who you could label as runners. Players who are particularly problematic for an offside trap, for example, like Liverpool's. The likes of Joe Willock, Joe Linton, St. Maximin. You've got Almiron as well. All these players, Jacob Murphy included, all these players can kind of, run from deep and stretch your back line, basically, and cause problems, making off-the-ball runs, arriving late and stuff. And I think on the break, these could cause some issues for Liverpool.
Yeah, because that's the one thing, isn't it, that I think it would be an over-exaggeration to say teams have success against Liverpool doing this, but they always seem to get maybe 1 or 2 chances on the break. That's one thing. That feels like it's always going to be the trade-off of the way Liverpool play. The aggressive, we play in your territory, we push our line really high, pin you in. The trade-off is you've always got this small window that can be exposed in terms of fast breaks and players running in behind and getting kind of in 1v1 situations. Obviously, Liverpool get punished far less than other teams will because of how dominant Alisson is in the goal, but it's still always a risk, and they could have the potential to expose it this weekend.
Yeah, well, just for a bit of perspective on that, John Harrison, who actually his data appeared on Monday Night Football recently. Actually, he does goalkeeping modelling and things like that, data related to goalkeepers. And according to his numbers, Alisson has faced 47 1v1s this season in the Premier League. Ederson, for example, has faced 27. So it's not far off double, 20 more than Ederson in terms of 1v1s, and that stems from Liverpool's approach, stems from, the offside trap and things like that, the high line. Obviously, Alisson's very, very good at managing those situations, but I do think Liverpool will probably face one or two against Newcastle, and if there's any kind of hangover from the midweek game against Villarreal, lack of focus, lack of speed, whatever it is, I think Newcastle do have the confidence at the minute and the players to punish Liverpool if they're allowed. So I'm not sure how this one will go. I'm finding this one difficult to predict, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, one thing I touched on at the start of this segment that I'll mention now is I did have a quick gander at their record, because obviously they've picked up a fair bit of points, but when I've actually looked at it, it does seem to be very flat track bully-esque, if that makes sense. So they've picked up a lot of points against teams that you could argue you'd expect them to, given the improvements they've made, but they're still maybe not quite at a level where they're able to stop or compete with the better teams. And I mean, they've played 11 games this season against teams currently situated 7th or above, and they failed to win any of them. Now, I know some of them may have come early in the year when they weren't at the level they are now, but they did recently play Tottenham at the beginning of April. They would be 5-1 in that game. I think about a week or two before, they were beaten by Chelsea. And to be fair, I watched that game and they did do okay. I think they were undone late on, but obviously it still ended in defeat. So, obviously they are an improving side for the reasons we just said. But Liverpool should probably be looking at this thinking they're not quite there yet in terms of maybe being able to stop a team as good as us, and therefore it should, hopefully from a Liverpool perspective, still be 3 points that they need.
No, it's a good point. If you look at the 6 games in a row that they've won at home, it has been against Crystal Palace, Leicester, Wolves, Brighton, Villa, and Everton. Not the easiest one, but not the hardest one either. And no real top 6 team in there, to be honest. So it's going to be interesting. As I said, potential banana skin there. It could be a few decisive things this weekend, actually, considering City have got Leeds away. You just never know what to expect with Leeds, do you?
No.
It's Ellen Road. It's a later game, so you never know with there. But hopefully something happens.
Yeah, I was just saying, if Liverpool win there, it just feels like it could be huge in terms of putting pressure on City. It's like going to Ellen Road. They're desperate to win, aren't they? Because they're actually still in that relegation battle. Under the light, it'll still be light, but you know what I mean. The evening kickoff always has that little bit more, a little bit more behind it, a little bit more aggressiveness. So, if Liverpool can put the pressure on City going into that one, then it's very interesting. But vice versa, if Liverpool was to drop points, that would give them a huge incentive. So it's just another big weekend. We've been here before, haven't we? We've been here the last few years. Every weekend just feels decisive. But
it is nice though when you get to those occasional weekends where it looks like, okay, something could happen here. Like, say for example, last week City had Watford. It was a knock on bet, wasn't it? This time around, something could change. You never know.
Yeah.
But we'll round up anyway.
Okay.
We'll leave it there. So, Dave, thanks for joining us, mate.
Thank you, mate. Cheers, everyone.
And we'll be back next week to talk about the Champions League final. hopefully, if Liverpool gets through, and whoever Liverpool are going to face and things like that. So, yeah, join us then, and thanks for tuning in. See you then.